Good morning. I now call the April 8th, 2020 Special Administrative Briefing and Work Session of the Marion County School Board to order at 9 o'clock a.m. Please silence your electronic devices to avoid disturbing others. I'll now ask the school board attorney to explain the rules for this board meeting.
This work session is a public meeting as defined in Florida's Sunshine Law. The board is dedicated to full transparency in its meeting and its work. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board has adopted uniform meeting procedures, including the right for citizens to participate. The board will allow public comments regarding any work session item listed on today's agenda at the appropriate time. Speakers must fill out a request form and hand it to the school board secretary. After the board and superintendent have completed their discussion on a particular agenda item, the secretary will call the speakers' names in the order received. At the podium, speakers are asked to state their full name and address and to spell their last name. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. As required by the Sunshine Law, the board must maintain orderly conduct and proper decorum throughout this meeting. Speakers may criticize subject matter and decisions in a respectful manner, but not people. Finally, speakers must be very careful not to violate the privacy rights of others, especially students and their family members, by mentioning their names or other identifying information. Thank you for your time.
I was under the impression that the superintendent was going to be here this morning. They had a brief presentation, but with that being, she's not here, so with that being said, we're going to move forward. Good morning, Ms. Jarrow. Can you hear us? Thank your phone is muted. Still muted. There you go.
Good morning.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And Ryan is via audio with us. So we're excited this morning as we get to bring forward and interview your 2 finalists. And we'd like to, do each of you have 2 packets of interview questions in front of you? If you do not, raise your hand.
As of yet, I have not passed them out yet. I'm going to pass them out right now.
All right, you may go ahead and pass them out, sure. Just a few little housekeeping tips as we get started.
Ms. Attorney, we're going to need another copy for it. Thank you.
So you will have 1 set of interview questions for our first candidate and 1 for the second. So if you want to fill in our first candidate's name, Dr. Diane Gullett, you can fill it at the top and then sign your name as well. And like I said, just a few housekeeping items. We will, Reverend Cummings will lead off the interviews this morning, and he will greet the candidate, welcome the candidate, and then have them share a little briefly about their background. Each of you will have 2 questions, and if you look at the order, we'll start with Ms. King with question 1, and we'll go right around the dais. So I think if you look closely, I think, Ms. King, you've got questions 1 and 6. Ms. Stacy, you've got questions 2 and 7. Mrs. Strower, you have questions 3 and 8. And Ms. McCall, you have questions 4 and 9. And double check me to make sure I got that correct for you. And the candidates know that they will have 5 minutes per question. And we should be great schedule for an hour long that at the end of that time, and I'll kind of time if it seems to go over, but then we'll have Reverend Cummings will wrap up the interview at the end of that time. Then we'll take a couple-minute break and then bring the second person in for you, unless, I'll kind of get a feel from the board to see if you guys need the break or not. Any questions for me before we get started? Because if not, I'll text our first candidate and tell them to sign in.
Do we have a timekeeper? Are we being that rigid with time, or?
Well, and you know what I'll do? That's a good question, Ms. Thrower. I'll have a timekeeper. I'll be keeping time here. But unless they go way over, I think we can be a little flexible as long as they're kind of within that hour. What's your pleasure?
That was a good question.
Works for me.
I can step in at 5
We need to
minutes and
keep the
say,
time.
Yeah.
Ms. Gerald, I think we need to have a timekeeper here, because we don't want to be unfair to either of the candidates, and just keep everybody on the same playing field. We can
Perfect.
work the clock,
You have-
Elena? Can't do the clock? Okay. All right, so we'll keep Ms. King, can you keep time for us?
I can keep time.
Thank you. Ms. King will be
I
our official
appreciate you being the
timekeeper today.
timekeeper.
Thank
Perfect. All right. So if we're ready, I'm going to text our first candidate because I said I asked them to hold off. I wasn't sure if we'd be a little later. So in a moment, we should have Dr. Diane Gullett joining us.
I'll just put a timer on for 5. It'll work out. It'll buzz.
She really needs to be listening with everything. I wonder if the attorney could keep the time.
I'm happy
If
to.
it's easier
Okay.
for you, because I'm
We're
going to
gonna,
step off.
Ms. Gerald, we're going to actually
Yes,
have
sir.
our attorney keep the time.
That way Kelly can.
And that way,
All right.
Ms. King won't be
I'm good.
distracted. 5 minutes for everybody per question, guys.
Yep.
Let's make sure that she can get in.
Thank you.
We certainly appreciate your flexibility during these unusual times. I said because we don't know when, how long this will go. So it's nice that we're able to continue to move along. And I believe we've got Dr. Gullett signing now. I will step off the screen so that you can focus on her. Good morning, Dr. Gullett. She's got her phone. Can you hear us, Dr. Gullett?
She may be
She
muted.
might be, she's probably dialing the number right now. Let's see here. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so Dr. Gullett, I'm going to introduce you to Reverend Cummings, our board chair, and then I'm going to step off the screen so that you can interact this morning. Nice to see you. Nice to see you as well.
Good morning, Ms. Gullett. I am Eric Cummings, Chairman of the School Board. I want to introduce everybody to my right, Miss Kelly King, Board Member, Mrs. Nancy Stacy, Board Member, our Vice Chair, Miss Nancy Thrower,
Good morning.
and then Miss Beth McCall, Board Member. This morning, you're going to be interviewing with us for the Marion County School Board Superintendent's position. We're going to try to keep this orderly and do it the best way that we can. Each question, you're going to have a series of questions, and those questions, you're going to have approximately 5 minutes per question. You can take the whole 5 minutes if you want to, or you can use however much time you need within that 5 minutes. Our attorney, Ms. Suzanne Green, is going to be our official timekeeper, and she'll let us know. As we start, I'm going to ask that you'll give us a 3 to 5 minute brief overview of your background, introduce yourself to this board.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good morning, Reverend Cummings, and members
Morning.
of the board. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today, and I am truly honored to be considered as your next superintendent. This is a very special community, and with the transition from an elected to an appointed superintendent, I feel confident that my experience and my leadership style, as well as my commitment to this community, make me an ideal fit for the Marion County family. And I grew up in Florida. I passionately served my career as a teacher, as a principal, as a district leader, and now as a deputy superintendent. And after beginning my teaching career in Volusia County, I worked for Orange County Public Schools for 19 years and only left there because Dr. Jar was appointed the superintendent of Clark County School District and asked me to serve as his deputy. It's been a true honor to serve in my current role, leading the education for rural, suburban, and urban areas of Southern Nevada. But I do believe that it's now time for me to come home to Florida and serve as your superintendent. I'm married to my husband and my best friend, Rick. We met in high school, and Rick has had the pleasure of working in Ocala for the past 4 years. We have a deep respect for the people, the heritage, the culture of the unique place. And our roots are in North Florida. We graduated from Orange Park High School in Clay County, and we are blessed to have 3 amazing sons. that are now adults. They are graduates as well of public education, and they excelled because of the opportunities that were provided to them. And as a mother and as an educator, my mission has always been to advocate for every child, regardless of where they are, to have the same opportunities in education that our family did. My greatest strengths are my vision, my integrity, and my fairness, often described as being very calm under pressure and a true collaborative leader. Without question, I have very high expectations, no doubt, because our students are counting on us. But I do walk side by side with everyone that I work with, and I'm always honest and very professional in all of my interactions. Above all else, I'm an ethical leader, and I welcome the opportunity to address some baseless allegations that have been made against me about my district level. I lead where I'm needed most. I have a keen sense of what is working and what is not, regardless of the role that I'm in. I'm a systems thinker, and I get to work to improve the outcomes in front of me. In my more than 30 years of education, I've focused on ensuring that every decision that's made is in the best interest of students. I have facilitated the professional growth of others, and I designed systems to improve the outcomes. And during my tenure in Florida, I was blessed to lead diverse populations of students and leaders, transform some of the most struggling schools in the state, supervised a group of schools nearly the size of Marion County, and I also built a comprehensive leadership development pathway and pipeline. And because of some of that work, I was asked to lead the redesign of professional learning for the state of Florida, working across all of the districts in the state. And I look forward to our time together today. I do believe that I am the person that you're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett. Again, we're going to have a series of questions. Can you guys hear well?
I would like to be able to hear just a little bit better.
Give us a second. We want to see if we can try to adjust the volume a bit.
Certainly.
Can you hear us well?
Okay.
I can. I just turned you up on my phone to the highest level. It's a little low, but I can manage, I think.
When you speak, if you will speak into your microphones, that will help her hear, and we'll ask her to do the same.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay. As Mr. Christian just said, we're going to make sure that we speak directly into the microphone so that you can hear us better, but we ask also that you do the same thing so that you can be a little bit clearer. It may require you kind of putting the phone up closer to you. I'm not sure.
Yes, I'll pull it up. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Because we want to be here. So we're going to ask a series of questions, and they're going to go from to my right. And Ms. King will be the first question. I'll give you the first question.
Good morning. During the first year, how might you go about determining the strengths and weaknesses of our school district, and what would your first 90 days in Marion County look like?
Wonderful. Thank you. I think it's important, first of all, to become authentically engaged, not coming in with any predetermined plan, except to come in and listen. So I would set forth to work very collaboratively with each of you as board members and to get your input in what you think the goals should be, what's working, what's not. I would then next work with each of the different stakeholders. I would meet hopefully face-to-face, depending on how this pandemic shakes out in the next 6 months. But I would work face-to-face and seek input from principal groups, from teachers, even student representatives, work with support staff, all of the different department and district leadership, and support staff in those areas as well, student representatives. And I would also work with the unions. I would also then seek input from the business community, which I know has been a vital part of supporting education in Marion County, working with community leaders, faith-based groups, and obtaining what is working from their perspectives and what needs to provide, what needs some additional support. And I think after really essentially engaging that, I would take a look then at, I know that the district strategic plan is coming to a conclusion this year, 2020, to work with you as the board to start to lay out an action plan. And what does that work look like going forward based on the input? What are the goals? How do we achieve them? How do we measure them? How do we monitor them and engage everyone in the process of developing that and holding us accountable for those outcomes?
Thank you. My second.
Okay, I'll ask my question now. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
I'll get a little closer.
How would you build a good working relationship between the board and superintendent? And please cite examples.
Absolutely. Great question. It's critically important for a school district to be successful. There has to be a very strong relationship between the board and the superintendent. I think that is the cornerstone of the work. I think the community will trust that the outcomes will be achieved if there's a strong working relationship. So specifically what I would set out to do is to establish trust, to work with you're my bosses, and to be a strong communicator, and to make sure that specifically we would meet one-on-one. We would set aside, probably I would hope in the beginning, if you're willing, a retreat for us to sit down together and plan what does this look like moving forward, moving to an appointed superintendent. What does the governance model look like? What are your expectations of me? And how can I be of service to make sure that I'm operationalizing those goals? So set aside some time for a retreat, and then working on a system of communication that will sustain over time. So I would see that as perhaps weekly or biweekly meetings, one-on-one with a common agenda for each of you as board members, providing weekly updates from the field and the operations of what's working, what's not, what are some items that you need to be aware of that are coming forward under consideration. I would go back to then trying to have some quarterly updates with you and retreats set aside to see how we're doing. What are you comfortable with? What needs to be adjusted? How are we doing with our strategic plan? What additional information needs to be brought forward to the public? And so we continue to gauge in a very a strong cycle of that. I have worked with strong governance models in my career. So I know what is possible. I know what it looks like and sounds like. And it's based upon strong communication, no surprises, consistency, accountability, and making sure that the public understands what we're doing, why we're doing it. And I think that too can work in Marion County.
Thank you. Ms. Dora?
What would you do to build trust and promote confidence in the superintendency among employees and the community?
Thank you for that. I think trust is the very first and most essential skill. That's what needs to happen first. And I believe that you build trust by being yourself. Having come to, having left the East Coast and coming to a new place and being an outsider, I know what it feels like. I know how important it is, and I was able to very quickly develop trust here in Clark County School District, because I think people know what you know and what you're about and why you're there. And so what I would set out to do in Marion County is allow people to get to know me. You would need to get to know me as the superintendent, know that you can count on me, and I'm trustworthy and I'm capable, and I would be a strong leader and a presence in the community. I would be very actively engaged in being out in the field. That's just who I am and what I do. I do that every day now. I have in my entire career. I would be out in schools, walking with principals and leadership teams. I would be walking with folks in transportation. How are things going? What's working? How can I help you? How can I support you? And so being authentically engaged in the work, leading, asking questions, not just asking questions, but also following up. So people give you input. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to follow up and ensure that the information that you receive, that you need to know what's working and what's not, that there's accountability and that they can trust you to follow up and to do what's best for the district and for the students in Marion County. So I think that needs to continue. People need to know that you're reliable and they can count on you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What has been your success as a school leader in partnering with the
Are we all back?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Beth, can you go ahead and ask your question again?
I don't know that she can hear us yet.
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Okay?
Can everybody hear, can you hear us, Sandy and Dr. Gullett, can you hear all of us?
Reverend Cummings, I can hear you just a little bit, not very well.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we're going to try this again. A little feedback. What has been your
When we have 8 microphones open at one time, it's like opening the floodgates and hoping that the water doesn't rise. Okay, Mrs. McCall, you want to go ahead and try it again?
All right, we're going to try again. Can you hear me, Dr. Gullett?
I can hear you.
Okay, we're going to try this again. What has been your success as a school leader in partnering with the business community? And please mention the partnerships that have developed as a result of your leadership.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So, partnership I mentioned earlier. Can you hear me okay? Or feedback?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I heard some feedback. Partnerships are essential in education. It's a community effort. And so some of the things I've done, I've had several partnerships that have developed in my career. One of those I developed when I was in Orange County Public Schools and worked with the University of Central Florida, working to try to establish a very comprehensive pipeline and pathway with evidence-based work and hands-on learning. Developed a partnership with them to train principals, supervisors, and principals using avatars. Excuse me, using avatars. And so what we were able to do is, through some cutting-edge technology they had, worked with the staff there, and our folks learned how to become strong coaches and mentors, practice what it looked like to give authentic feedback to those personnel that they supported, and that helped to enrich that cycle of effective instruction and producing a positive relationship there. So that was one of the great partnerships that has continued and sustained over time. Another partnership that I work closely with is very unique, helped to establish the first K-8, pre-K-8 school in Orange County in the Paramore neighborhood in the urban core, and worked closely with establishing unique partnership with a hotelier, Mr. Rosen, and with Orange Blossom Health and the Girls and Boys Club, and we were providing on-site pre-K 2-year-olds through 8th grade education with full wraparound services and in dental care and health care for the whole family. That was the first of its kind in a neighborhood where they didn't even have a neighborhood school and services. So a full wraparound support. So worked very, very closely with the partners to bring that together in a true community model. school environment that could help wrap around the entire family. That was essential. Here in Clark County, I've done a lot of work with creating some CTE pathways, which I know you've done phenomenal work with in Marion County, and trying to work with our business community, which has been, they've been very supportive in opening up pathways and to industry so that there would be support in how we align our education and our certification of our students graduating from our schools to go right into the workforce. And so I've worked very closely with our institutes of higher education and with our business partners to align our focus of our work and our strategic plan with their plans to get our students directly into the workforce and ready to work.
Thank you.
Dr. Gullett? Question number 5.
Yes, sir.
We know that you've probably researched Marion County as much as we've researched you. Please detail your plan to improve morale amongst all Marion County School District employees.
Thank you, Reverend Cummings. I think that's essential. I am a genuine leader. I am very approachable, and so I think right off the bat, the morale has to be addressed. It is the elephant in the room, and I think that the not only the employees but the community deserve the opportunity to heal. And what I would do is, I was sharing earlier that I would become authentically engaged in the work. I am a true visible leader, deeply embedded in what I do. I'm all in. And so I would set off to, again, establish that trust, listen, authentically listen, and follow up, and develop some ways to recognize what is working. I think, part of recruitment is also retention. So building morale is about setting aside a culture of trust that the leadership and that we collectively with the board, with you as your superintendent, that we would set that tone. That's essential. And then working in the field, as I mentioned earlier, to hear what's working, what's not, to really begin to recognize very professionally what is working and provide value and respect in not only big ways and celebrations, because I think that's helpful, but I also think it's even more important in the day-to-day operations and the work, respecting people for what they do, listening to what they have to say. And it will be essential in the beginning and even for many years to come, to provide different ways for people to share what's going on with them, what is working, what isn't working, what their concerns are, what their fears and their anxieties are. Done that in my career as a principal. I always provided many opportunities in different ways, even for some of them to be face-to-face, and for others who didn't feel comfortable, at least initially, but there's ways that they can share what's going on and then how we can support them. So done that as a principal supervisor. I've done that as a deputy. So creating the mechanism and the different ways for people to know they can trust you. And that comes from over time. When they get to know who you are and know that when they share something with you, it doesn't go anywhere if they ask for it not to, and that you will follow up and begin to reshape practices that support them. And when they feel that trust is there and there's respect there for their work and who they are, education is a special place. And I believe that the stakeholders and the 7,000 employees in Marion County are in Marion County because it's a family, and they're there to provide service to the students, regardless of the role, whether they're driving the bus or they're providing meals to the students. Everyone's there in support of students. And so if they are respected for that work and treated kindly, I think then you start to begin trust.
Thank you.
Do you need a drink, or are you ready to move on?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay.
Water anyway, but it's dry here.
Okay, question number 6. What would you do to positively impact student achievement? And please discuss in detail successful efforts to narrow or close identified achievement gaps in your current district?
Okay, very good. So I've had a lot of experience with student achievement, improving that in Florida. And so coming to Clark County for it being a very, very large district with over 360 schools is a challenge. That's what brought me here. And so what we had to do is set aside some ways to really focus in on what student achievement looks like. What does high-quality teaching look like, and what does high-quality leadership look like? We know it's very clear that the teacher, a highly effective teacher, has the greatest impact on student achievement. And in schools, the second behind that is the principal. And so making sure that we set aside, what I did is I engaged the team, the cabinet leadership team, developed an academic leadership team, an academic cabinet, and we reorganized the district into regions that would ensure that we had the strongest instructional leaders supporting the schools. The work closest to the classroom is essential. And so one of the very specific ways we did that is to establish high-quality core Tier 1 instruction, which was not necessarily in place everywhere. Just because there wasn't a knowledge of what that could look like, and to have the resources to provide support with that. So high-quality curriculum, high-quality instruction, and high-quality assessments were essential. So we set off to do that. I worked very closely with getting the right people in the spots. I went out, and I still do this. I go out and I model what does it look like. I work with principals and leadership teams. And so because we brought in a comprehensive balanced assessment system, we are now able to use, with a newly designed, allergies, a data dashboard, so that our teachers and our principals will be able to access high-quality data that's formative to guide that. So we are already seeing growth in our student achievement. It hasn't been a whole long time, but we have already started to see some increases with proficiency. And the gap data that we're beginning to already close is based on a couple of things. It's based on the Tier 1 instruction, closing the gaps with proficiency and elevating the learning gains, but also looking at discipline data and making sure that we are a very comprehensive approach. We know that we need students in schools. If a student is not in school, they can't learn. And so we have started to change some of the practices around discipline and built a new comprehensive code of student conduct. So in providing support and resources to students that are struggling to make sure that they're in class. And so we've also increased advanced coursework, CTE programs, highly engaging programs. So now our data begins to change because we're closing the gap, working with our ELL population and providing better resources to them, as well as revamping our special education supports. We had a lot of work to do with special education, and that will continue, but we're starting to see the shift there. So there aren't quite as many gaps between ELL and special ed in our general education populations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
A little low.
How would you handle decisions that are unpopular with the public, but educationally best for children? Please cite actual examples.
Yes, well, thank you. That's a fact of leadership, is to make decisions that are best for students. I think that when people know that what you're about and your decisions are squarely focused on what's best for students, sometimes the decisions are going to be unpopular. Sometimes the adults struggle with those decisions. And I think that, as I shared earlier, it's really important to be transparent and to be a strong communicator, to share what that looks like and why the decisions are being made, and how you'll go about doing that. I think it's important to engage the stakeholders. And so one of the unpopular decisions that was made when I first arrived to Clark County is the reorganization that I touched upon just very briefly earlier with reorganizing our district. We had 13 performance zones that supported schools, and those were created at a time where what was expected of the leadership was very different than it is now. That was in a time when there was a lot of autonomy based on legislation in Nevada that you were operating, 360 separate independent school districts, essentially. They were called precincts. And so the performance zones and the folks that were leading those were great people, but they were hired at a time when they were looking for managers. And so in order to really accelerate and address the needs of our students and address the needs that are essential for student achievement, we had to really focus in on instructional leadership and hiring people that could do that work. I believe that you can't lead what you don't know. And while it's not intentional, sometimes people just have not had the opportunity to learn those skills. And so had to move into reorganizing into regions. We put them into 3 regions. The leaders that were leading the performance zones, those positions went away. So we helped and we facilitated those leaders into different positions. Many went back in to become principals. And we hired new personnel, new leaders to lead this work. Not an easy change in our district or an easy time, but we created demographically equitable regions to provide some standardization and to rebuild and refocus that everything that we do is about students. And those supporting students need to help to lift that up and be able to walk that walk every day. I walked with the leaders in their interview process to make sure that I could see that they could lead the work and they could guide, have facilitated conversations with teachers and principals. And so not a popular decision for many. Some understood it, but we are moving forward. Our students are benefiting, and I believe our employees and our leaders in the field are benefiting from this new focus.
Okay, there's the second last question already.
Okay.
All right, please describe your vision and philosophy on serving students with special needs.
Thank you. We are blessed that public education serves the needs of all students. Truly believe that. And I've had the wonderful opportunity, while I've not been a full-time special ed teacher in my career, I had the wonderful opportunity to work with special needs students throughout my career. I started as a teacher. I worked with special needs students, had to work on designing curriculum and resources and engage with them to support their needs. And so my philosophy is it's a great gift in that every child needs different things. Even if they're not special ed, every one of us needs different things. And special needs students have great gifts, and we need to meet them where they are. We need to be flexible and put our strongest educators and support staff with them to support where they are so that they can each reach their goals. I believe very strongly in parents as partners. As a principal, I worked very, very closely with parents and involved them in the process of this is a collaborative decision on how do we best support your child. Worked and involved advocates in the community and organizations that could provide resources that sometimes we couldn't provide, and that's okay because we will do whatever it takes to support the needs of those students where they are. But we have to be careful not to lump students with special needs into certain categories. As a principal, I also made sure that they were fully mainstreamed to the best of our ability into all programming, into Gen Ed, full access as much as possible. When I was principal at Waterbridge Elementary School, which is a Title I bilingual center school in Orange County, I set aside a goal of within 2 years I became a fully inclusive school, which took some work. I had to invest some time in training, working closely with the staff in our general education population and with the special, our ESC teachers. And we did a lot of co-teaching, a lot of modeling. We integrated those two over time. We started to expose our students to more and more progressively general education opportunities, so that by the end of 2 years, we had full functioning PLCs, cross-functional, weekly, with general education special needs teachers, but there was a fully inclusive model. And our students excelled in that. They're very capable, and I think that you have to give the full benefit of the doubt. And where you feel like you might have gone a little too far and struggled, you pull back a little bit, but you have to provide the opportunities to the students to do their best, because I think often our children will surprise us, and they often do. And so I believe that they're capable of amazing things. So my heart is wrapped around our special education students and the fact that we provide opportunities to them that, decades before they might not have had in public education. So I'm proud of that.
Thank you.
Describe your thoughts about student discipline and safety.
So thank you. What immediately comes to mind is early in my career, I was a dean. I was the first dean of a school. It was an elementary school, but it was a large dual campus with 1,500 students, and a lot of discipline. There are a lot of discipline issues there. We had 19 buses that brought students in from different neighborhoods, which was part of our challenge. And so I set aside a tremendous amount of time trying to build systems to support and change the narrative at our school. My philosophy, my work has been around creating a safe environment, not just for students, but for employees, because sometimes when there's a high discipline environment, sometimes employees get very anxious and they need support too, so in training. So I set aside quite a bit of time in training and systems to integrate some new protocols. So put proactive measures in place. I visited homes. I rode the bus home. I made sure to connect with the community. I brought the community in. And so I also set forth, and I continue to do a lot of this, specific goals for students that were struggling with their behavior. We I worked with the teachers to enact classroom meetings and train them how to do that to set the tone for the day. And the whole message here is about being proactive. I believe that kids aren't necessarily bad kids. I would say to them, that was just a poor choice. And I'd say it's never too late to turn your day around. That's the other message that I've always given to students. And so, yes, there should be accountability for some severe behavior that reoccurs. I'm not opposed to not holding accountability for those things, but for the progression of behaviors that seem to occur because sometimes the students just don't have the skills to communicate what their frustrations are. We need to make sure we have high quality instruction in the classroom and adults that are supporting them, that are honest with them and provide them resources. So it's that balance of providing a safe environment for everyone, other students and employees, but being preventive and trying to get ahead of those things that can trigger students just because they are in shutdown and they don't possess the skills sometimes to manage that. And so it's a very balanced approach. It's honest. It needs to be fair and equitable, but you have to provide some real meaningful time in training staff and students. And here are things that we do. This is our culture. This is what we expect of you. And because we have high expectations of you, also tells you that we care. And I think when students know that you care about them, then you often see some changes in their behavior. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in my entire career. And we just they have to know that the adults around them care, but we are going to hold them accountable. So it's an important balance there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Dr. Gullett, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Lean in a little bit.
So we're going to be closing out, but in this last few minutes, is there anything you'd like to discuss or share with the board that you feel we need to know so that we can that would help you set apart yourself for being the candidate for our superintendent position for Marion County?
Thank you, Reverend Cummings. I do. I think that there are a couple things I'd like to go ahead and share for you and for the community, of course, that there were allegations made against my district travel. I've had over 30 years of career that I would consider very clean and stellar. I am a very trustworthy and honest person and ethical, day in and day out. With high integrity. And so happy to just share with you and address any concerns about that they're baseless and I think they came about because of the great work we're doing for students. And I know I'm not alone, but everything I did was with other district leaders on all of my trips, and we were very proactive in planning for those trips and sought advice in advance. So I want to put that out there right off the bat. But I believe that in what I have to offer for Marion, I carefully chose to apply to Marion County because I believe it's a special community and a special family. I'm not about setting up, going forth with a title. It's about the work for me. And the decision to become a superintendent is about becoming the superintendent of Marion County. I believe that I have the skill set. I believe that I am the person that can effectively lead Marion County through this process of working with you as the board to develop that trust. I've proven that my entire career that people can count on me, and I'm a strong leader, a very visible and authentic leader. And collaborate with you and with all the stakeholders to ease the anxiety, if you will, of the community of making this critical decision to move toward an appointed superintendent. And I know what that can look like. I know what it should look like. And with my experience and my characteristics, I believe that I can successfully do that and make Marion County the place to work in the entire state. And truly transform how we do our business and creating a very positive culture.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett. We appreciate your time. We thank you for considering Marion County as a place to want to come and work and live. And anything else do I have from you guys? All right. Thank you, Dr. Gullett. We appreciate you taking the time out to come and interview with us on this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett. We'll be in touch. You're welcome to sign off. We appreciate it. Great to see you. You can go ahead and sign off.
Thank you. Yeah,
nice to see you.
Sure. Yeah, working on that.
So, Reverend Cummings, do you? I can reach our next candidate and see, since we're a few minutes ahead of schedule, or did anybody need to take a break? A quick break?
Yes, give us how long? 5-minute break.
Sounds great.
Because it always ends.
Yes, ma'am. 5 minutes.
Sounds perfect.
Ms. Gerald,
Now I
can
can
you
hear you, correct?
Can you hear us now?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, we're back online. We're back on. So we're ready for the next candidate.
Awesome. Dr. Morrison, can you turn on your video, please? Let's see. Let's see here. Dr. Morrison, can you hear us? Oh, now we lost it, right? Kevin, I think we lost the Zoom feed, right?
Sandy, does he know to call the phone bridge? Sandy, can you hear me? Does he know to call the phone bridge?
She's muted.
Dr. Morrison is calling the phone bridge now, so you should hear him clearly.
Hello?
Hello, Dr. Morrison?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sandy, are you on?
You can. Yes. Can you hear us, Dr. Morrison?
I can.
We can't see.
Great.
Perfect.
See him.
All right. So can you click, Dr. Morrison, on your video button in your bottom left-hand corner to start the video so we can see you?
There he is.
Perfect. All right, so Dr. Morrison, I will introduce to you Reverend Cummings at the head of the room, and then I'll step aside for your interview.
Good morning, Dr. Morrison. Eric Cummings from Marion County School Board Chair. I'm going to introduce our other board members who are going to be interviewing this morning. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to interview with us for this position. To my right, Ms. Kelly King, board member. Ms. Nancy Stacy, to the right of her, board member. Our vice chair, Ms. Nancy Thrower.
Morning.
And then to the right of her, Ms. Beth McCall, board member. We're going
Good morning.
Good morning. So we're going to ask you a series of questions. However, you have about five minutes to answer each question. Our attorney is going to be our official timekeeper for those. You don't have to take the whole 5 minutes if you don't want, but it's up to you. And so we're going to ask, just give us briefly a 3 to 5 minute overview of your background and introduce yourself to us, please.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts about this amazing opportunity to lead with the board, Marion County Public Schools. And let me start off, obviously, having to do the interview this way. It just shows the impact of this pandemic that Marion County, the state, the country, and the world is dealing with right now. And it's my heart and prayers go out to the community in Marion County. And it is the impact on public education is certainly something I know we're talking about today during this interview. So in terms of my background, when I know you have my resume, but I always like to start talking about my leadership story by talking about my experiences in school. I grew up in a very poor area in Virginia, did very well initially in school. My dad was in the military. We went overseas, went to a school in a different country. My parents thought it'd be a great experience, and it was really challenging. I went from being very successful as a student to being in a school that had different curriculum, had started earlier. There was some anti-American sentiment, and I felt very alone, but I had this confidence that when I got back to American Public School, it would all be okay again. Went back to the United States, and I had a lot of lost learning and found myself struggling and getting put into what oftentimes we call corrective classes or B-level classes. But I was in classes where students sometimes give up hope, and I really thought I was going to be on a pathway to be one of the 1.2 million students who drop out of school every year, about one every 33 seconds. And it wasn't until we moved to Fairfax County in Virginia, and I had two extraordinary people who changed my life. Mr. Cloyd, my English teacher, and Miss Leach, my math teacher. And they saw past this frustrated, struggling student and got me caught back up, built back the skills I needed, and I went on to high school to take honors and AP courses, to be the first in my family to go to college, and then do some extraordinary things in public education. And so I've often said no matter what I do that's good in public education is in that debt that I owe those two individuals. I've had an extraordinary career. I've been so blessed. I started off as a math and social studies teacher, also teaching special education inclusion, and there quickly was asked to serve in administration. Moved into a middle school and then a high school. Both schools impacted by poverty, high rates of mobility, English as a second language, high rates of special needs students. And I asked for those opportunities because one of the things I believe about leadership is it about service. And if you care about service, then you want to go where the service is needed the most. Working with our teachers, our parents, in very collaborative ways, we got those schools turned around and two of the highest performing schools in that district. And then I was asked to come to Montgomery County Public Schools as an area superintendent. Again, I asked to go to where the needs were greatest, where there was the lowest rates of achievement. And again, working with teachers, principals, community, we were able to get some very promising results in a very short period of time. At that point, I had the extraordinary opportunity to lead Washoe County School District, Reno, Nevada, over 64,000 students right at the heart of the recession. So in a state that sometimes struggles to fund education, there were huge impacts because Nevada was the most impacted state in the country at the time with the recession. I worked with an extraordinary board. We galvanized the community, our educators. We created a strategic plan, and we did a lot of things around raising student achievement, graduation rates of over 14%, increasing rigor, parent engagement programs, lots that I'm so proud of the collaborative work that we did. And then I went to Charlotte-Mecklenburg School, one of the biggest school districts in the country, over 150,000 students. And again, working collaboratively with the board, our communities, our teachers. We took the existing plan, built onto it, once again, increased student achievement scores, graduation rates, more rigorous coursework for our students, and really built a lot of community trust. And my last year as superintendent, we were actually able to pass a bond at 88%, the highest in the history of that district. And so I'm very proud of the work that was accomplished in collaboration in Washoe County and in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. At that point, I stepped away from the superintendency. Many times as a superintendent, I would have people say, you ought to run your school district like a business. So I went to the private sector, and I went to McGraw-Hill Education first as the government affairs officer, and then was quickly promoted to the president of the K-12 division where I served. I've had an extraordinary opportunity in the private sector. I've learned a tremendous amount, but I have a really strong desire to get back to more mission, vision work, and I'm exceptionally excited about the possibility of, with this board, leading Marion County Public Schools.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. We're going to ask a series of questions. The first question will be coming from Ms. Kelly King.
Good morning. During the first year, how might you go about determining the strengths and weaknesses of our school district, and what would your first 90 days in Marion County look like?
One of the things that I fundamentally believe as I watch superintendents come into a district, oftentimes they have the plan already. They know what they did in their previous district, and so they want to take those things that worked in a previous experience and try to apply it to a new experience. And I fundamentally disagree with that. In both districts I've had the honor and privilege of leading, I did not come in with a plan. I came in with a commitment and an entry plan. And I make that plan very public, and it speaks to my attention over 30, 60, 90 days of how I want to come in and Stephen Covey speaks to this. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. And so in those 30, 60, 90 days, it's deep, authentic listening. It's trying to understand what our teachers and our principals and our support staff, it's a deep understanding what our parents and students and community leaders, business leaders, faith-based leaders all think about what are the strengths of our school district and where do they think there are areas of improvement and what do they think should be the high priorities that we should focus on. And in both experiences, it's not only about having the plan and sharing very transparently, very intentional, how you're going to go about doing that deep listening, but it's also in real time communicating with the public what you're hearing. You know, communication can be very tricky, and so sometimes you walk away from a meeting and you think, well, this is what I thought I heard, but then you find out, well, you didn't get it quite right because there's more nuances based on our experience. So I repeatedly share in real time who I've met with, what I've learned, make sure I heard correctly, and then build that and share it with the board. Because that 30, 60, 90-day opportunity is done in collaboration with the board. That 30, 60, 90-day plan is built in collaboration with the board. So there's constant communication as we're thinking collectively together about where are the areas that we want to focus and where are the areas of improvement. As I reflect back on my time as a superintendent, both in Reno, Nevada, and in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, some extraordinary things came out of that listening and learning opportunity. When I was in Washoe County, listening deeply to our teachers, there was a great confusion around standards and the curriculum, and there have been all these initiatives. And so listening to our teachers, that was one of the things that we realized. We had to get more structure around the standards and the structures and instructional practices that were important to our school district. Listening to a group of students and parents who had dropped out of school, realized that the only way we were going to increase and get better as a district and increase graduation rate was to find a way to return these students back to school. And from that listening and learning, we created what we called our door-to-door for student success, where members of our school district, along with political leaders and community leaders, went to each community and knocked on doors for students who had dropped out and invited them to come back into the school district with a different plan to help them be successful. And that was one of the ways we were able to raise graduation rates to 14%. When I was in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, the year before I had become superintendent, there had been school closures in a growing school district, and the majority of those school closures have been in our African-American community. And so being at a Baptist church one night, well into the evening, listening to parents who were still pained by the closure of their schools and a desire for those schools to reopen, led us in our strategic plan to reopen those schools with new programming that were better serving not only those communities, but part of our pathway to be good partners with our business and our community leaders. So I'm a big believer in having that entry plan being about listening, collaborating, and ultimately either solidifying the existing strategic plan in the school district or creating a brand new one that really creates our North Star for how we're going to move forward.
Thank you.
How would you build a good working relationship between the board and the superintendent, and please cite examples?
Yeah, the relationship between the superintendent and the board is so critical. If that relationship is strong, if there's stability with that relationship, that calmness and that sense of strength cascades across the entire school district. And so, I know on my resume, I have been very honored to be distinguished with different awards, but I'm most proud of the fact that the work that we did together, both the boards that I had the privilege of working with, were also nationally recognized for really providing great leadership that helped us get better student results. So, the interesting thing is, a superintendent search, and even more so now where we're doing it digitally, oftentimes it reminds me of online dating. Now, I say that I married my high school sweetheart. I am in her office. If you look behind me, you see a lot of awards that they all belong to her. She's a nationally board certified teacher and distinguished college professor. So I don't know much about online dating, but I do know that online dating oftentimes leads to marriage. And I say that because I think the relationship between a superintendent and a board is a lot like a marriage. We, get interested, we fall in love, and that's great. but then there has to be a lasting relationship. There has to be mutual trust. There has to be the building of how we're going to work together, because there will be challenges. There's nothing that is easy about leading the school district. There are the challenges every day of raising student achievement, building community trust, and keeping our students and our staff safe. That's complicated enough. But then when you're, as we were in Nevada, dealing with a recession, or when I was in Charlotte, a series of school shootings across the country, or here now in Marion County, where we are going to be dealing with the impacts of COVID-19. It's really challenging work, and so we have to develop our structures, our processes. We have to create ways to know our shared values and core beliefs, and we have to establish our processes in a very transparent way for how we're going to co-lead the district. I've often believed that the best way to do that is to have early on, as part of that 30, 60, 90-day experience, individuals, and many times they're found right within the community, that can help facilitate working opportunities for us to start getting to know each other and develop our rhythm, our cadence of work. And so I think all those things are important. They've been part of how I have worked collaboratively with my board in previous school districts. And then there's a set of experiences that I've gained on the private sector, too, that I think are also very helpful. And I think will be important if we move forward in Marion County Public Schools.
Okay. What would you do to build trust and promote confidence in the superintendency among employees and the community?
The position of superintendent, let me start off, there's different ways people approach leadership, and people get excited about the authority that they're going to have or the status of their leadership. Honestly, I've just always felt that leadership is about service, and I'm a big believer in trying to be a servant leader. And so the first thing I'll say is my vision for how a school district is organized. You get on a school district website and you see the board, the superintendent, then you see district staff, then you see principals, then halfway through you see teachers, and then you see support staff. And I've always felt that that's just fundamentally wrong. I believe that a school district is really organized with three concentric circles. You have students in the middle, then you have teachers and principals, because they're who interact every day with our students. Then everybody else in that outer circle is support staff, including building service workers, food service workers, bus drivers, the board, and the superintendent. We are there to support the excellent work of our teachers and our principals, and that's important to really lead. So I know in my experiences of leading two of the largest school districts in the country that trust is so critically important. And so I believe it's not something that you earn, it's ongoing. It's not something that you can ever feel that you've accomplished, because you always have to work to earn the trust of your employees, that you are, in fact, that servant leader. And so there's a couple of ways that in my previous districts that I've tried to accomplish that. So the first thing is that you have to be present in our schools. When I go into a school, I don't just drop by for a 30-minute visit. When I go to a school, and I'm in schools all the time, in both school districts that I've led, I've actually had staff members say, you're the first superintendent I've seen in my time being at the school. And so within the 360, 90-day plan, I visit every school multiple times, and then it's my ongoing cadence of being a superintendent. I'm in schools all the time. That's so important. And so to come into the school, to immediately greet the building service workers, the secretary, the food service workers, and all the support staff and bus drivers that are so important, and listen to what they're saying. How are they feeling? What's on their minds? And then spending time in the classrooms, not just dropping by and spending a minute, but actually sitting in, getting a chance to watch and observe, interacting with teachers who might be on their break, just ask how they're doing and what they want me to know. And then spending time with the principal, really debriefing what the principal saw and what I saw, and having great conversations, and then sharing that with district staff as we start to continue to build and execute on our strategic plan. I think that's really important. I think also trust comes from making sure that you are constantly meeting and listening to groups of individuals that represent our distinct groups of employees in the district. So When I became superintendent in both districts, I asked what was the cadence for meeting with employee groups or representative groups. And oftentimes I found, well, we meet when needed. And I just don't find that acceptable. So in both districts I've led, I've met with our employee groups at least once a month, oftentimes more than that, especially as we're coming up to important things like legislative process or budget. And not just to meet, but to really make sure that we're structured, that we have agendas that are going to be really proactive and productive, to make sure that we take notes so that, again, we make sure we understand these were the issues that came up, to make action items so that if I make a commitment as superintendent that I'm going to look into something or address something, that I can commit to that because it's recorded and there's a level of accountability as the leader that's really important. Again, that engenders trust. And then, the other thing I'll say about trust is it's about transparency and honesty. It's about sometimes as a leader, you have to share things that are not popular. If there's going to be budget cuts or if there's going to be some change to our schools that may not be popular, but to be honest, to be out there, to listen, to get collaboration. And at the end of the day, I think trust is built not because people say, hey, I told you to do this, and I actually saw that you did it, but that people know what are your core values. They believe in your core values, and when you make a different decision, they don't believe it's for any other reason that you wanted to avoid a challenging situation or you did it for the path of least resistance, but that what is in your core values, what's in the core values of our employees, that we're trying to do the things that are best for the students of Marion County Public Schools.
Thank you.
What has been your success as a school leader in partnering with the business community? And please mention the partnerships that have developed as a result of your leadership.
So when I first went to Reno, Nevada, as I said, we were right in the middle of the recession. And so what was interesting at that time was the state of Nevada is built around certain industries that when the economy is booming, the state booms in terms of its economic success. When there's economic downturn, those industries are very challenged. And so coming into the recession, there was a total opportunity to rethink the value of public education. And it was really a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with business leaders, not just in the Washoe County, Reno community, but across the state. And so to make sure that, so oftentimes as a leader, we talk about getting kids ready for college, but it's really about getting students ready for college and careers. And so as we went about doing this work in Washoe County and in Charlotte, similar situation, what was very important to us is to make sure that as we were thinking about the expectations for not only graduating students, but asking this important question, as they walk across the stage and get a diploma, is that diploma really a testament to their ability to get a highly skilled career, or to be not only able to get into college, but to be successful? And so we started to think about the skills that not only the academic skills, reading, writing, and math and science, but what were the other skills that make students very successful in college and very successful in the workplace? And what we found in working with our business leaders in both committees was it's really the same set of skills. It's collaboration, it's communication, it's critical thinking, it's problem solving. And so we started to think, how do we develop and build those skills into our curriculum and our instructional programs? And our business leaders were fundamental in those endeavors. And so it wasn't just the partnerships that we created or the opportunities, but it was inviting our business leaders to be part of our academic program. So what are some of the other ways that showed up in both districts? Well, we started to be very focused around career pathways. And as part of our commitment to career pathways, to put rich programming into our schools that could actually lead students to be able to focus on a particular segment of the job market, so agriculture, art, manufacturing, the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, the arts. And again, our business leaders were amazing about helping us put those programs into place where we actually created career academies with career pathways. When I was in Charlotte, we worked collaboratively with the business community and the community college, and there was a study called Pathways to Success. And it talked about these career pathways, and we invested deeply because we had a commitment to make Charlotte an intermodal hub. And in my conversations with several business leaders in Marion County, there's similar work around that thought of intermodal hubs in Marion County, and some great work that's already started. So our business leaders helped us on those career pathways. As we relaunched our educational foundations in both districts, our business community came forward, not just with resources, that was so appreciated, but time. They helped us create the structures to create very successful foundations that could help augment the other resources that we were bringing to bear for our students. I made it a point to actively get our community business leaders engaged in our schools, so principal for a day programs or visiting, and then getting our principals the opportunity to likewise go out and spend time with these business leaders so they could, in fact, figure out which business factors would help make them more effective leaders as they came back to their schools. And then something else I've just always believed is involving our business leaders in the development of our budget. And so in both districts, getting our business community to weigh in. And what that really helped in both districts was it wasn't about how creating our budgets, but the transparency. And so we worked very diligently on, through Baldrige training, creating visual process maps for every stage of our budgeting so that we could share that with the public would understand that's how we make our decisions, and then give us feedback in terms of if they thought that there were better processes to bring to bear. As you know, on my resume, I'm very honored to have been selected as National Superintendent of the Year. That is a testimony to great work that happened in our community with our teachers and our board and our community. But I was once asked by a reporter, what award am I most proud of being involved with as a school leader? And it actually was in Nevada. Our district was recognized by the Nevada Taxpayers Association for Good Fiduciary Officers of the Taxpayer Dollars Award. Now, what was special about that was no school district in Nevada had ever been recognized even as a nominee, let alone to win it. But it was a recognition of the work that our board, our leadership team was doing to be transparent in how we operated the district, how we were committing to get all available dollars directly into the classrooms for our teachers and our principals. And that work was done with our business.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Thank you. Next question. We know that you have probably researched Marion County as much as we've researched you. Please detail your plan to improve morale amongst all Marion County School District employees.
Yes, sir, Reverend Cummins. I try to be a teacher on special assignment, and like most teachers, you have to do your homework. If you're going to put high expectations on your students, you have to walk the walk. And so I certainly know that you've done extensive work and research on me, and I appreciate that. I've had colleagues say, "Wow, we just talked to someone at Marion County." And let me tell you what we said. But likewise, I've done that with Marion County, and I've spoken to former educators, current business leaders, former superintendents of the district, former board members, and so I've done a lot of research. And so, I think what's important is what that means in terms of a potential match. As I said, I think morale really always starts at the top of an organization, and it's tricky sometimes because if there is a difference of opinion, if there's struggles, if there's challenges at the top of the organization, that stability cascades all the way through the organization. And so I think what's an amazing opportunity with this particular process is that you will be selecting and appointing your superintendent. And it's just, being in Nevada, we looked at governance models for how we wanted to organize the state in terms of education. And it's always tricky when the governor doesn't get to select the state superintendent or the school board of the state doesn't have a role. So aligning all of that is really important, and that's the opportunity here in Marion County. So I believe in terms of improving morale, it really does start off with stability and calmness at the top. If selected as your superintendent, we will have hard work to do. I know the five of you have strong opinions. I've heard that, I've seen that, and I do too. And it's all very passionate about how do we best educate children? How do we support our teachers in schools? And so we are going to have disagreements sometimes, but how we have disagreements and then collectively move forward is important for how that provides stability and calm and support for our schools. Morale is so important. When I went to Nevada and I went to Charlotte, in both instances, the board indicated there were issues of low morale, and it was a really focus of mine to try to do something about that. So I think that really starts off with making sure you baseline. And so to make sure that we are taking climate surveys and getting surveys about how our teachers and our educators feel about culture and climate, and to be able to make sure that those are done. I've brought in outside groups to help develop those instruments because, as we all know, surveys can often say what you want them to say. So to make sure the surveys are reflective of the voice of our educators and our schools, so that when we survey, that they do in fact reflect that those are the things I want to share. Those are the things I think are important for the board and superintendent to know. And then that gives us an opportunity to baseline and then show improvement in terms of having our educators feel more positive, engaged, feeling like they are optimistic about the future of the school district. And in both school districts that I led, after we did those baselines and we did many iterations of our surveys, we made them public because that's what you have to do. You have to be very transparent. And then we're very encouraged that the climate survey showed a very positive gain. Never where you wanted them to be, but again, the positive gains were encouraging. I think culture and climate are also comes from, do our employees feel engaged in the important decisions of the district? I've met very few teachers and principals who want to be making every one of the key decisions in the district, but they want voice. So how do we collectively work together to make sure that when we are making important decisions for Marion County Public Schools, that those teachers and those educators, principals, and support staff have voice? And I think that's very important. And then I'm a huge believer in recognition. When I was in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, I just feel it's so important. The community feels so strongly oftentimes about our teachers in our schools, but how do we do things that are intentional that demonstrate that? And so working with our business leaders, we were able to have what we called a convocation. We brought all 20,000 plus of our employees in Charlotte-Mecklenburg downtown to the Comcast Arena where the Charlotte Hornets play, and we had a celebration of their work. We had national leaders, we had state leaders, we had business leaders and community leaders all coming up doing things to show their appreciation for our educators. And it was quite special. I still have teachers reach out to talk about that today. And then the final thing too is just all of our employees want to get better at their craft. So how we go about professional development, not doing it to them, but really giving them professional development that they have voice in, that's job embedded and ongoing, is an important part of raising culture and climate as well.
Thank you.
All right, question number 6. What would you do to positively impact student achievement? And please discuss in detail successful efforts to narrow or close identified achievement gaps in your current district or your past district.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I am so proud of the work that collaboratively with the board, both in Washoe County and in Charlotte-Meck, that we were able to accomplish. In both districts, student achievement rose with all groups and in every subgroup on our state testing. And that was at a time when we were pushing for more rigorous standards and more rigorous assessments. And the thing that was very special about it was not only did every group of students go up, but the students who were lagging behind the most had the most acceleration. So everyone got better, and we were able to close achievement gaps. When graduation rates rose 14 percentage points in Washoe and 10 percentage points in Charlotte, again, all groups of students got better, but the students who have been lagging behind the most saw the fastest increases. And so how do we accomplish that? And just some things that come immediately to mind to me. The one thing I know as a leader is that the most important thing that determines success for students, the best thing that we can do to raise student achievement for all groups of students, is to have a high-quality teacher in every classroom. The research is very clear. You can do a lot of other things that might bring some business, but great teachers in a classroom feeling that they are equipped with the tools that they need, led by a supportive principal, and that's really where education soars. So we made a very intentional focus on making sure that we attracted and retained high-quality teachers, that we gave them the tools to feel supported, that we created career lattices so that teachers didn't feel they had to leave the classroom to have professional development growth, but they could still stay in the classroom and do all the amazing things that they do daily. So first of all, it is a deep, deep, deep commitment to teachers and to principals. I'm a big believer in data and always have been. And I think to have the sort of student achievement increases, and especially to close gaps, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, says you have to confront the brutal truth. And so you have to look at your data, and you have to be honest about the data and say, all right, overall, it might look good in a particular area in reading or math or science, but then when you start looking at groups of students, you find in most school districts that students impacted by poverty, English as a second language, special education, and students of color are not where we want and need them to be. So what are the intentional ways in looking at the data that you can start to make improvements? I'm a big believer in progress monitoring, and especially in the early years, because you have to find out where students are, assess them, and then provide intervention and support every 14 days to really keep our students where they need to be. We invested in early childhood because this is something the business community, speaking to the previous question, but for every dollar we spend in public education on early childhood, we get $1.67 back that we don't need to spend on things like incarcerating young people or social services. So early childhood is not only economical, it provides a student a pathway to actually walk across stage and receive a diploma. We put intentional practices, focus, and resource on our special education students and our English second language learner students. Those students come to school, they need more, not less at school. We made sure that we provided programming for them that did in fact give them more. As I said, professional development. Oftentimes, school districts, a superintendent or chief academic officer, they drop a big program on our teachers and say, this is going to make everyone better. Teachers have had no voice, and it's a one and done. And we do a survey monkey, and superintendent reports to the board, 90% of all the teachers really like the training. Yeah, maybe they like the training, but then how many actually use it, and can we tie that professional development to accelerated academic success? And so we were very intentional in both districts about involving our teachers and leaders in professional development, creating professional learning communities, and making sure that professional development was ongoing and consistent. We did a lot around equity and equitable frameworks. The reality is in this country, we do oftentimes get kids who come to school with less at school. So in our frameworks, we really looked at how do we focus more, how do we get more resources to the students who need it most. And then the last thing I'll say is we put a lot of focus around technology. Technology will never, ever replace a teacher. But technology, purposeful technology in the hands of a great teacher can really allow that teacher to group and regroup, assess students, scaffold in new and different ways. And so really trying to put great technology tools with excellent teachers were just some of the ways that we were able to get those student increases I'm very, very proud of.
Thank you.
How would you handle decisions that are unpopular with the public, but educationally best for children? And please cite examples.
Leadership oftentimes can be very lonely, and you have to make hard decisions. And I always rail. One of the things I say to my team all the time is, how do we get to the harder yes rather than the easy no? Educating all children in any school district is hard work, and there are so many differences of opinions, and so you're going to have to make decisions that sometimes are not popular. But I would just say, I do feel like the question sometimes is that the reason the decisions are unpopular is because the superintendent and sometimes the board working together have not done the adequate outreach to the community, the outreach to employees to involve them in the decisions. Boyd's had this philosophy that when most people have the same data and they know the same things, they tend to come to the same conclusions. And then even though it may be an unpopular decision or a decision that's difficult, people will come together and they will more often than not do the right things, especially when it's in service to children. I've made a lot of hard decisions as the superintendent, and there are challenging decisions that are made all the time around policy, around budgets. But I'll give you an example of one that still speaks to me. And when I first got to Reno, Washoe County, again, we were going through the recession and we were being very, very impacted. We were having to cut a significant portion of our school district budget. I had already begun working very collaboratively with our employee groups, and we had to have deep conversations around what this would mean. As we all know, 80% of most school district budgets are people. And so as we were looking at these massive cuts that were potentially coming, we were trying to think about what we needed to do in the here and now to potentially offset really challenging situations in the future. Through that collaboration, through that focus, through the active involvement, being very honest and transparent, and then fighting every day in this state capitol for every available resource that we could have, our employee groups came together and we made some shared sacrifices. And it was painful to ask, but it was awe-inspiring to watch these groups come together. And when each group at a press conference was talking about the furlough days that they were taking between 2 to 3 days, I stepped up immediately and said I was taking 10 because I felt it was very important as the leader to show that level of commitment. So that was very challenging to ask. But what ultimately happened was we actually ended up getting cut less than we thought we were going to. We were able to restore some of those days to our employees and then ultimately create a pathway for additional funding for our schools in the future. So again, not popular, not easy, but being transparent, being honest. As long as people understand the core values that you're making your decisions as a leader, then they tend to, even if they disagree with the decision, support you trying to make the best decisions possible for students.
Okay, number 8. Please describe your vision and philosophy on serving students with special needs.
One of the interesting things is when I was a teacher, I was asked to get trained in teach AP U.S. history. And with some of the best training I've ever had, getting trained to teach advanced placement history. At the same time, I asked to be trained around inclusion. I just saw things that were happening in inclusion classes to serve not only our special needs students, but our regular ed students that I thought would be very beneficial. And so that next year, as I was teaching AP U.S. history, I was also teaching several classes of inclusion. And really what hit me was it was a lot of the same strategies, it was a lot of the same focus. Special education at the end of the day, it's a premise and a promise. If you're going to make a commitment of educating every child, have you identified that some students have special needs, and can you create a plan to service those special needs? And what always struck me is that's absolutely imperative to serve our special needs students, but really our commitment that we should have for every student. And so with special education, the first thing is it is the law. We have to create a plan for the student. We have to provide services so that they can be academically successful. And the law is very clear that it's supposed to be done in the least restrictive environment. So the default should not be a self-contained classroom for our special students, but should be an inclusion program where adequate training and resources have been placed. So what do I mean by that? In both school districts I've led, we were very intentional about not only training our special education staff about teaching in inclusive classrooms, but also teaching and providing professional development for our regular education teachers. We kept the ratios low because if you have a class that is overcrowded or overly represented by special education students, then you're not going to get the inclusive practices that you're supposed to have. One of the things that I've often found in the districts I've led, and we've tried to be very intentional about training, is that in many cases, parents are brought along after the fact. And the law is very clear, and the intent should be very clear. Every step of development of an IEP, there should be focused, intentional, proactive engagement by the parents, because really an IEP is positioned as parents for their advocacy on behalf of students. And so making sure that there's training, making sure that it's been resourced correctly, making sure that the facilities are appropriate to welcome all of our students, whether they have an IEP or not. And in both districts, and especially in Charlotte, we so believed in this as a core value that we actually went about the proper work of creating a personalized plan of progress for every student. And really that was built off of the intentionality and focus of an IEP for our special needs students. So it's critical, and it's work I'm very proud of.
Thank you.
Describe your thoughts about student discipline and safety.
So one of the things, superintendents are expected to have a lot on their plate, and but I've always tried to categorize them in 3 areas. You, as a superintendent working with the board, are focused on academic achievement for all students. You, as a superintendent working with the board, are focused on building public trust and confidence and being good fiduciary officers of the taxpayer dollars. And then you, as a superintendent working with the board, are tasked and charged with keeping our schools and our students and our staff safe. Such a core commitment and so important. And so let me kind of separate each of those first because they are all tied together but a little different. When I first became principal of a middle school, we had 1,000 students in our middle school, and we had over 5,000 referrals the year before. And that was just astonishing. And so as we looked at the data collectively with our teachers, some interesting things came out. Out of the 5,000 referrals, the 5,000 referrals were about half were only by about 3% of our teachers. So immediately we started to ask, not judging, but what kind of support can we do to provide for the teachers that were using referrals perhaps in a way that was not intended. One of the things that's really interesting is when you look at what really creates great learning outcomes, there was a study that came out of Harvard, and it centered around things like care, challenge with students, and there was also another C of control. And really when you dug into this data, that was the number one indicator for a successful teacher educating students, with the premise that if a teacher does not have control of the class, students just can't learn. And so as we think about the teachers that we're probably hold fierce in our hearts, they had great classroom management. They were in control of their classroom. There was no question about who was in charge. It was the teacher in a caring, collaborative way. And so in both districts that I've worked in, we have looked at how we can enhance and resource appropriately our teachers so that they can have good classroom management and really provide support and resources for that to happen. When it comes to student safety and teacher safety, it is, again, such a critically core commitment. In both districts, we approached it in similar ways, but sometimes different. In Nevada, there were so many social emotional learning needs, highest rate of teen pregnancy, highest rate of drug use amongst young people, highest dropout rates in the country. And so we looked deeply at social emotional learning and actually embedded social emotional learning standards into our curriculum. And we thought that was very important and had some very promising results. In Charlotte, Mecklenburg, unfortunately, we had the tragedy at Sandy Hook, that school shooting, and then several other school shootings where we had to go to our state legislature and ask for support, and our county commissioners and get support. And we did more to enhance with security cameras, single point of entrance, and fencing, and then also ramping up our school safety officers. We looked at our wraparound services and freeing up our counselors to spend more time with our students. So there's ongoing things. There's so many things that are important. I've spent a lot of time with what's happening at the Florida State Department of Education with the recent legislation, and I think it's actually some of the best work in the country around how the state, working with the districts, are keeping a core commitment to keeping students and staff safe.
Thank you.
Dr. Morrison, in your final few minutes, is there anything you would like to share with the board that you feel that we need to know so that we can properly assess you as the candidate for our next school superintendent?
Yes, thank you, Reverend Cummings. So a couple things I would just share. I have had extraordinary opportunities to have a 30-year career, mostly all in the public sector, a little bit in the private sector, serving public education. And whether it was as a teacher, a principal, superintendent, now in the private sector as the president of a company, there's been a deep commitment to be collaborative, to be proactive, and to really be a servant leader. Oftentimes people have said, when it comes to my career, I've had this magic carpet ride, and there's a lot of truth to that. It's been so fortunate to constantly have people ask me about a different opportunity and to think, is that a good thing? And to be very blessed to have those opportunities. My magic carpet ride took a 2-week halt, my final weeks in my last school district, and that was very painful. There was a circumstance where the other person that reported to the board at the time made allegations that had no reflection of the way I've led school districts, the history of being collaborative, proactive, positive, and that was very hurtful. And I had to make a decision. I had to make a decision about how you challenge it and what would happen with my own reputation, the good work we've done in the district, if I tried to do that. Additionally, I had children in the district, and my mother had suffered through some pretty major health issues at the time, and I had to think about her. So thinking as a father and as a son and as a school leader, I thought it was best to step away from that opportunity, as hurtful as it was. And the only thing I asked for when I left the district I did not ask for big severances or anything like that. I always watched when that happened in the school district, and I never wanted to do that. I simply asked for confidentiality and non-disparagement, and I have kept that. And unfortunately, that was broken on the other end, and that's, and again, hurtful. But I have nothing but positive reflections about the board, the work that was done, and I'm very proud of the work we did in that school district. And again, the interesting thing is there's nothing about that that reflects the evaluations I received as a school leader and superintendent, nothing that's reflected in the public testimony of any board meeting that you can see. And again, it's hurtful, but one of the things you learn on a magic carpet ride is when you get knocked down, you get back up. And I have done that. I have still been very fortunate to be asked to serve as a school district superintendent. I did decide to challenge myself to go into the private sector, and I've been very blessed to do some good work there, still serving schools and growing my skills. But I've had a deep commitment now for some time to get back into work that I'm very passionate about. And I made a decision several months ago that I wanted to come back into a superintendency. And as I started talking to some of the groups at Source, I was very intentional about asking for what I was looking for. And I've had an opportunity to lead huge districts. I've had an opportunity to lead national spotlight districts. But I want to come to a community that really believes in its public education system. I want to come to a community that really cares about getting students to the next level, helping them be college and career ready. And the more I started to hear about Marion County, I got really excited. I'm excited about the opportunity to be the first appointed superintendent and to add to the good work that's already happening and to be a vibrant member of the community. I have a foster daughter that lives very close to Marion County. My wife's family lives in Florida, so there's lots of personal reasons. But it is that commitment to serve every student every day in Marion County that has me very excited to be considered as your superintendent.
Thank you. Board members? Thank you. Dr. Morrison, we thank you for taking the time out to interview with us this morning, and thank you.
Thank you, sir, and please everyone stay safe.
Sandy?
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. I think you can sign off now. Great. Reverend Cummings, I apologize. In the midst of the interview, our whole community lost their internet. I'm like going out. I could hear everything, but I'm going out to ask my husband, and he's telling me that we've lost it. Also, I was using my hotspot, and then I was scared to death to click back in case I would interrupt because I knew you were going. The flow was smooth, so I apologize for. I could hear, you just couldn't see me.
Right, I got the note.
So,
thank you.
All right. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule. I mean, pleasure of the board. You're first, if we're going to be doing a recess so that you can make your one-to-one phone calls, they're scheduled to start at 11:30, but we can either leave it at that time or we could back it up to, if you would like, 11:15. What's the pleasure of the board? We're completely flexible.
How you guys feel?
That's fine, I'm good.
Okay, we'll take a recess and start them at 11:15.
Perfect. I will let the candidates know. So we'll be, if you look at your time schedules, you know you'll be 15 minutes ahead of schedule.
Okay, where is our time schedule?
So, do they call us or we call them?
They call us.
They are calling you.
Correct.
Okay.
And I guess we can just use the room back here?
I'm going to go home. We don't have to be back till what time?
Supposed to be 2:30, but we're probably going to up it based on what we need to do.
15?
To 2:15.
You can probably come back by 2 o'clock if you would like.
That's what I'm thinking.
Come back by 2.
Okay.
And where are our times?
Where's our times? Where will we find those?
Email them to us.
She emailed.
Email your times to you.
You just move them up 15
Okay.
minutes.
Yeah, because I'm.
Does
not
everybody
gonna
have
sit
their
here for
times or
3
no?
Hours.
I'm looking.
I think I'm 11:15 and.
So you emailed them today on their candidate materials? No.
To reassess.
No, you had a separate email yesterday.
You should have got an email, I guess.
To my personal?
Yes. You sent it to personal emails, correct?
Oh, it might have been to your personal with your time.
Let me see. I don't.
Can you resend Ms. Stacy hers?
Absolutely.
Anybody else? Just resend all of them,
Yeah,
please.
send mine too, please.
Got mine.
I got
I
mine.
don't have mine.
I don't have one.
I know we spoke, but I didn't receive it, I don't believe.
Can you resend Ms. Stacy's and Ms. King? You good, Ms.
I
Thorne?
will certainly do so.
Thank you.
All right, and so we will, am I hearing you correctly? We're going to go into recess until 2 o'clock?
I got mine. You don't need to resend mine. It's under Sandra Giro, not under
And they're going
Ray.
to call us on our cell phones, correct?
And they're calling the cell numbers, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I'm
So we will recess to,
resending Ms. King's right now.
okay, and we'll recess to 2 o'clock.
It's under Sandra Giro.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Meeting recess to 2 o'clock.